Hello, this is Peter Quinn with Kidder Matthews in San Diego, California. I'm joined today by Marty Edwards, an attorney and one of the key 1031 exchange subject matter experts for Accruit. We'll get more information about Marty's company in just a second. He's joined by Logan Lee. Logan is with Moody National, also a exchange 1031 and DST expert. And we're going to unravel all of those mysterious acronyms as we move through the next half hour. Marty, please introduce yourself with a little more depth.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Well, like you said, my name is Marty Edwards. Yes, I'm I would say a real estate attorney by background, but after not choosing to practice law indefinitely in the mid 1980s, I was smart enough to jump over and use my real estate knowledge to start working in the 1031 exchange field as a qualified intermediary, although that term didn't come into being till later, but those were the old Starker trust days. Anyway, during that period of about 40 years, I've done about, by my estimation, 25,000 individual client transactions. So there's very few fact patterns and things that I haven't faced before, and I can often help people with that extensive background. I've written a lot about exchanges in different forums and things and speak quite a bit about it. And for anybody that does have a question that we don't get to today, if you care to go to our website at accruit.com, ACCRUIT, and you search in the question, there's probably a 99% chance that I've written a one-pager answering that question. So feel free to make use of that resource.
At the conclusion of this video, we're going to have the full contact info for both Marty and Logan. So for those of you who are enjoying this broadcast, we will not leave you in the dark. Logan, give us a little background on you.
Sure. I started at Moody National Companies. It's a Houston-based commercial real estate company in 2005. And I was an analyst. I started off as a multifamily analyst and then transitioned to our investor services department where I led it. And I help 1031 investors. Although we are a developer, we're a mortgage banking company and a management company, we provided tax-deferred strategies for investors and provided 1031 investment programs for investors. And so somebody had to coordinate with the investors. And so I did that early on in my career and then expanded into on the distribution side and was an executive at our company for many, many years. And I wanted to get back working with investors. So I started Moody Exchange. We offer qualified intermediary facilitation services, and I get to ask Marty questions every day and bug him. And I've learned a ton just from working with Marty. So we partner with Accruit and with Marty and his team that help us with our 1031 services. So it's been a joy. Based here in San Diego with Peter. And on the side, I coach baseball. So basically all I do now is coach Little League baseball and I work on the side. As those of you on this podcast know Little League, it's intense right now. But anyway, it's been fun. And thanks for bringing us on. Appreciate it, Peter.
Good. So Marty, who are the clients for an exchange and what kinds of exchanges can they consider?
Yeah, well, I'll get to that in a second, but just want to clarify that our company is actually a qualified intermediary that does the paperwork and the administration under the IRS rules to keep people straight in an exchange. Moody Exchange has a similar name, and we're also using it kind of synonymously, but they have clients that need exchanges. They don't actually do the paperwork for them. They work with our company. So we have kind of a complementary services, and Logan also helps people find replacement property, which is something that we don't do. Anyway, I would look at my client as the referral sources, because it's hard to find individuals out there in the world that need exchanges. Sometimes they come organically to our webpage or the repeat clients, but it's hard to find them. But there's channels that we work with, like Moody Exchange, that does have access to the clients that need these services. Or in my case, I know many attorneys, having done this so long, and the attorneys often know that their client is the one that wants to do the exchange. So who's the client? Well, it could be the taxpayer who actually wants to do the exchange, but I also consider real estate brokerage companies just like yours, accounting firms, law firms, and so on as my clients. But the end client is the entity that's doing the exchange. Now, that can be an LLC, a corporation, a partnership, individuals, and so on. Anybody that pays U.S. taxes and would be paying capital gains and other taxes, want to defer them would be a prospect for us.
So, Logan, you're you're the train running on that rail,
Mhm.
delivering product to Marty's company. Where are you getting your business?
Yeah, it's great point. I mean, we've been doing this now for so long. We structured our first 1031 product, like I said, in 2005. We're going to talk a little later about Delaware statutory trusts, which are a replacement option. We did our first one 18 years ago in 2006. So between all these years, just referrals and we've worked with over 10,000 investors across the country. So I would say mostly referrals from existing customers, as well as working with guys like you, Peter, people that are in the trenches that are actually listing the real estate, as well as Marty said, attorneys and CPAs. We do a lot of events, a lot of seminars, a lot of education, just to make sure families know that they have options and they've got great real estate that has experienced capital gains. And it's been around. Section 1031 has been around for 103 years. Okay, so this is not a new thing that they have access to. So we work hand in hand with a lot of different folks to get clients.
I tell you firsthand that I do several exchanges a year, and the critical element in all of those exchanges is the intermediary. Because if you get the wrong guy or group working on your deal, I can guarantee you that at the end of the day, when we must close or we lose some of the tax benefits that accrue when you do these properly. So I really look very hard at the company. So I'm so thankful that I've gotten a chance to spend some time with you today, Marty, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the exchange process and the different options that you are steering clients through. Give us a little background on that.
Yes, you did ask that before, and I didn't get to that yet, but there's maybe three categories that I would say, or maybe even two categories of exchanges. The one by far is what's most common. We'll call it just a forward 1031 exchange. You sell your relinquished property. You have 45 days to identify potential replacement properties. In most cases, you're limited to 3 identifications, but there's some more rules that sometimes give you other options. I had a client yesterday that needed to fall into the 200% rule, but I don't want to take too much time on getting into the weeds there. And you have to close within 180 days on one of the properties that you identified within the first 45 days. And to give viewers an idea of fees for those, it varies throughout the country, but I would say maybe a median fee might be maybe $1,100 or so to do a simple forward exchange. It's mainly just paperwork. The funds have to be protected. There's been cases where QIs that are holding the funds, which is necessary, have gone bankrupt and stuff, but for all intents and purposes, it's a fairly simple transaction. A little bit more complicated, but very, very popular are what we call reverse exchanges. And that simply refers to the fact that a client has to close and acquire the target property, but they haven't sold their relinquished property yet. So the sequence is reversed from a normal exchange. You sell, you buy, here you buy and you sell. And in 2001, the IRS came out for rules on how to accomplish that. And again, without going too much in the weeds, you have to use an exchange company to facilitate that. And the exchange company actually has to take legal title to the target property on the date of closing. It's much more complicated. Oftentimes there's loan documents to be signed. I've done them for hundreds of millions and I'm signing as the borrower. Those also have to be wrapped up, at least under the IRS safe harbor, in 180 days. There is some authority to go beyond 180 days based on this landmark case called the Bartel case. And those can range to in value from in fees, maybe from $6,000, $7,000, even up to $20,000, based on how big it is and how complicated it is. But it's a different relationship. The last category I would mention is when people are selling, but they have more value in their exchange account than the property that they're buying costs. So they have leftover money. That's, some of you might know the term is called boot, and that would be taxable if you don't do something with it otherwise. So unless you're buying a second property, your only real option would be if you are going to be making improvements to your target property, whether it's ground up development or just improving existing property you're buying. You can do that through another IRS regulation, same ones that covered the reverse exchange basically, and you can allocate additional proceeds to your fix-up costs. But it also entails the exchange company taking title to the property, and so they're more pricey than a conventional simple exchange.
If you have a remainder cash after satisfying a portion of your 1031, can you take that remainder and invest in a DST?
Not only can you, but that's really common. So either people tend to use DSTs either as a backup because they don't want to pay tax and they've got this property identified within the 45 days, but on day 60, some due diligence shows that there's environmental issues or some other issues they didn't expect. And if they did nothing further, they'd be out of luck. So it's common to identify one or more DSTs as backups in case the primary falls through. Those are, and Logan could talk to this more, but those are usually pretty, you don't kick the tires, you don't go look at the property, they're pretty much off the shelf. So they're secure and easy to get. And then the second reason would be if people don't spend the full amount on their first replacement property, the DST can often pick up the excess value there.
Logan, what's the most common problem that your clients run into when navigating this selling of their property and then pursuing avenues to reduce their tax liability?
Yeah, I think Marty touched on it. I think a lot of clients start the process late, right? Where they just are discovering, oh, maybe they were unaware what a 1031 was, they were unaware of that option, or they were just worried about selling the property first, and then they were going to. I hear that all the time from brokers and others, like, hey, let's sell this property first before we worry about doing an exchange. And those that do their due diligence early on and explore options, whether it be a DST or finding other replacement options, replacement properties, they do well. But the ones that delay and are not engaged in the market or maybe they had a deal lined up that they thought they were going to do and they did not have backups. Like Marty said, I think it's extremely prudent to come up with some backup options. But I get 911 calls all the time, that I've got one more day to identify here, and this property I wanted to pursue is no longer available for whatever reason. So real estate can get messy, as y'all know very well. So it's really good to have your options and utilize your options well, and not delay and not prolong your decisions. So those are the biggest issues I run into.
I've heard that COVID added some wrinkles to the 1031 DST process, and I'm really unclear about what those options might have been. Can either of you enlighten me on that?
Well, one thought that comes to mind is that people didn't like to get together in person during COVID. So whether it's the real estate broker or the other participants, looking through the properties, walking through someone's property, you look at it, you don't know who's been there and what kind of germs are there. So there was an uptick in people that like to do the DSTs because it's all kind of electronic, and you can live in Maine and you might pick a DST that's in San Diego, and you don't have to have all the personal interaction in addition to all the other many benefits of DSTs, armchair investment, regular return, you can count on it and so on.
No widening of the 45 or 180-day periods?
The only exception to that is if there's federally declared disaster areas, and you'd be surprised how often that happens. So if there's a snowstorm or mudslides in LA or whatever, the federal government will come and post something on a website saying, hey, you have extensions. And there were large extensions for COVID too, where sometimes 3 or 4 months after the 45, 180-day deadlines were up, they were automatically extended due to COVID.
Yeah. That's what I'd heard. I didn't hear any, real definition as I was, exploring that in the marketplace. For the listeners here today, I just want to remind you that what Marty and Logan are talking about are IRS vetted and approved strategies for avoiding taxable gains, the tax on gains on the sale of real estate. So this is not mysterious. This is something that is done every day by professionals like these two gentlemen, and they're very effective in reducing your tax liability. So what are some other avenues out there for investors, real estate owners to look at?
Well, it's pretty broad because these are considered like-kind exchanges. And the nice thing for investor purposes is that any type of real estate is like-kind to any other type. So the sky's the limit. As long as it's territorial United States, the nature of the property that someone may want to roll into, whether it's a triple net lease property or highly managed, it doesn't matter. It's all qualifies. It can even be vacant. It doesn't have to be income producing. It just has to be used as a trader business or for an investment. So a lot of people, especially in colder climates, they may want to do a trade and buy something in Florida, and a few years later retire, move into it. So it can even be, exchange eligible to begin with, and then become a personal residence or a second home later. And if it does become a personal residence and the tax is deferred along the way, and they kind of convert the use, Peter, I think you know where I'm going with this. They can later sell that property as part of selling your home and get the Section 121 exclusion, which gives a $500,000 break to a married couple. So there's some rules about how soon you can do that after you convert it from exchange use to personal, but it's pretty common.
So if I've got a second home and it has basically been used by my family and I on a very limited basis, and I've owned it, say, for 5 years, can I sell that or use that in my 1031 or DST pursuit process?
Maybe, and you hit the key words where you said very limited basis. The IRS does not allow you much personal use of that in order to make it eligible for exchange treatment. More specifically, in most cases, you can't use it more than 14 days a year. And then there's another rule where you can use it for up to 10% of the time that you had it rented out to other people. But those are, again, rather short time. So if you really wanted to make typical use of it as a second home, it doesn't really qualify.
So if I only used it 14 days a year, but I never rented it, would it qualify?
That's a good question, but I would say that, a lot of this 1031 stuff is intent. So if that's what you intended, I would draw a distinction. Let's say you advertise it for rental, you have a rental broker, and you do your best to get somebody in there, and you don't get it, I think you're okay. But if you're year after year, you're just having to sit there when it's truly rental property and you use it more than 14 days, I don't think you have a chance.
You seen any of that in the marketplace, Logan?
I get that question almost every day. I was telling Marty that, and it's kind of the gray area about your secondary residence. And I think it's something that everyone that's a viewer on here, if you're kind of kicking the can on doing an exchange, like Marty said, make sure the intent is there, that this was held for business or investment use. This is not a secondary home or a primary residence, of course. But I do get that literally almost every day from clients. So it's a big deal, something to consider.
One technique that's very popular, or maybe somewhat popular, is that a child will go to college in a certain town and the parents will buy a property there for them to live in as an investment. And as long as the child pays market rent to the parents, maybe some of that might even be gifted to the child, but the rent gets paid back to the parents. You can rent to a related party. You can't buy from one, but you can rent to one. And that kind of sometimes helps with that, the personal use issue. It's not considered a negative for exchange purposes if you have a family member in there, as long as they're paying fair market rent.
Yeah, you got to be a good planner. That
Yeah,
really helps. So Marty brings Logan and Peter a Charlie's Chicken franchise, and it's a long-term ground lease, and we form a limited liability company. And 5 years after that, I call Marty and say, "Hey, Marty, I need to get out of this thing, and I don't want to pay any taxes on it." How does that work?
well, if you're talking about as the lessee under the ground lease, if it's got a term of 30 years to run at that time when you're selling it or more, and that also includes extensions that are built into the ground lease. So if it's a 10-year lease, and let's say it's got 2 10-year options, that's considered 30 years or more. But anyway, if it has that time limit, it's exchangeable. It's considered like kind to any other kind of real estate. So if you can find somebody to take over your position in the lease, you can do an exchange.
Interesting. So I could just take my 33 1/3% interest and transfer that. Is that a stock sale or is that a real estate transaction?
You could do that in theory, but you're bringing in another important issue, which comes up constantly, maybe the most frequent one I deal with every day. And that's if you are a third interest in this LLC and you want to sell the ground lease, and so do the others, and you want to do your own exchange. One of them wants to cash out, one of them wants to do her own exchange. Then you got other complications, because the LLC as an entity can do the exchange, but without more, the 3 of you can't do your thing independently, which you can do.
Under no circumstance. There's no way around that.
There's always ways around everything. Okay. So in the industry, and Logan knows this, we've talked about it many times, but it's called a drop and swap. So what you would be doing is, with pre-planning, hopefully you would drop out the ownership interests in the parent entity, whether it's a trust or an LLC, so that three of you own it as tenants in common prior to the sale of that property. That's different. Now you're reporting it and selling it under your personal, name, as opposed to the parent entity, the old LLC, and you can go your own way in that situation if you do it right.
Can you do that without an attorney?
Probably not, because there's some documents that you need to do in connection with it. If the LLC is going to stay intact and only some are going to drop out, you have to do what's called a redemption agreement. Also, the IRS says that if three people are co-owning it and they have all the attributes of an LLC or a partnership, they're meeting every once in a while to decide about stuff to do with the property and, should we refinance it? Should we fix up the premises? And you make management type decisions. You can be deemed a de facto partnership, and they're going to say, we don't care if on a record you're tenants in common, you're not acting that way. So my point is, you may need a tenant in common agreement to keep you safe if you're trying to act as individuals and so on. So typically an attorney would be involved somewhere in there.
So we're in what some people would say is a stagnant economy. And I know that the commercial real estate volumes across the country have dropped dramatically, is not the right word, but it certainly has been retarded because of the difficulty in getting loans and interest rates that projects can tolerate. But what's happened in the exchange business? Have we seen in 23 and so far in 24 a lower volume of exchange?
Yes. So at least in our universe, and what I would call retiree 1031 exchange investors, which pursue the Delaware statutory trust, these are folks that want to get out of management and relinquish their control, which they're happily doing, so they could get mailbox money and invest in pieces of institutional real estate that are dropped in the trust, right? So in 2022, the industry did over $10 billion in Delaware statutory trust. And I say the industry because it's actually security. So you have to have financial advisors and broker dealers to invest in this passive income stream of DSTs. So 10 billion, and it was a high watermark for the industry. Last year we did about 5 billion, so 50% off from the peak of 2022. And this year we're projected to do about 4.6 billion, so even less. So yes, it makes sense. I mean, with interest rates as they are, I think buyers and sellers, there's a disparity between the bid and the ask, and transactions are just harder to come by. Although I am getting busier. I think, Marty, you're probably getting some more calls too. So I think people are stomaching the higher interest rates and the respective lower pricing that they may be getting on their deal, so that they can, because they're getting older, right? A lot of our clients are baby boomers and retirees that are ready to do an exchange and pass this along to their heirs. So I'll pass it on to Marty. I don't know if you've experienced any increase recently.
Knock on wood, it's always busy, but I would agree with you that it's quieter or less deals this year than there were last year so far. And I think that your window into the DST space, which is where you kind of operate, I think is representative of the larger real estate activity out there. So I would agree that my experience is similar to yours, and it's down a little bit compared to what it was last year, but still a lot of activity, I would say.
So let's crystal ball here, guys. Logan, tell me what's going to happen the rest of 24 into this time in 25.
Well, I wish I knew. I think the Fed is going to lower at least twice. Based on what I'm reading, I'm sure we're all reading the same stuff. And I do think alongside that, you're going to have, I think there's 10,000 boomers retiring a day. I think that there's just such an increase of folks that are ready to do something with their assets that maybe they held off after 22 and they've been waiting all 23 and the first quarter of 24. And I think that there's going to be some transaction activity that increases. That's going to help all of us on this podcast. The wild card, election season, right? I don't know. Traditionally that's a big wild card on what's going to happen to the economy. So I don't know if people are going to wait to see what's happening, whether who's taking office coming up in 25 may be the difference. So I love y'all's opinion, but in my opinion, I think we're going to see a steady uptick throughout the year in real estate transaction activity.
Marty?
I'll just let Logan's comment stand. I would agree with what he said. And generally I'm kind of busy just facilitating these things, and I don't spend too much time, looking at what the future is going to bring. So
Understand you're probably busy enough. I know that these transactions can be time consuming. They certainly demand an attention to detail. Well, this has been a really great conversation, guys. I appreciate Marty Edwards for joining me on this call today and Logan Lee for setting all this up. Again, those of you who are watching this video, there will be contact info embedded into the track at the end of this video. And if you have any questions on DSTs, please reach out to Logan Lee directly at your earliest opportunity, because you never have enough time. And Marty Edwards is probably going to be a little bit more in the background. He's going to be talking to Logan and me about what our clients' needs are, because we'll be introducing his company to that process, which I need some help with. So this is Peter Quinn. I'm with Kidder Matthews in San Diego, and this has been another Market Watch. Thank you very much.